The Silent River, a saga of the Indus Valley Civilization. The centuries of slow, steady development during the early Harappan phase were a prelude to one of the most remarkable urban revolutions in human history. Around 2600 BC, a great transformation swept across the Indus floodplain. The scattered towns and regional cultures coalesced into a vast integrated civilization. This was the beginning of the mature Harappan period, the golden age of the Indus Valley people, an era defined by an astonishing degree of cultural unity and an unparalleled genius for urban design. Across a territory spanning more than 1 million square kilometers, from the snowy foothills of the Himalayas to the Arabian Sea, dozens of cities and towns sprang up, all sharing a common culture, a standardized system of weights and measures, and most remarkably, a shared blueprint for urban life. At the heart of this civilization were its magnificent twin capitals, Harappa in the north, and some 600 kilometers to the south, the great metropolis of Mohenjo-Daro, the Mound of the Dead. These were not the chaotic, organically grown cities of Mesopotamia or Egypt. They were masterpieces of central planning, built on a scale and with a precision that was unrivaled in the ancient world. To walk the streets of Mohenjo-Daro in its prime would be to witness a vision of profound order. The entire city, blanketed in a pristine layer of snow, was laid out on a strict grid plan, its main streets as wide as modern avenues, all oriented to the cardinal directions. The bright, warm sunlight would cast perfect geometric shadows down these long, snowy boulevards. Each city was fundamentally divided into two parts. To the west, built on a massive artificial mound of mud brick to command the landscape, was the citadel. This was the civic and ceremonial heart of the city, a fortified acropolis containing the key public buildings. To the east lay the much larger lower town, the sprawling residential and commercial district where the majority of the population lived and worked. The citadel at Mohenjo-Daro was home to its most famous and enigmatic structures. Chief among them was the Great Bath. This remarkable building, which we imagine perpetually steaming in the cold, snowy air, was a large rectangular pool, rather like a modern swimming pool, built with expertly fitted waterproof fired bricks and sealed with a layer of natural bitumen. It was surrounded by a colonnaded walkway and a series of small rooms, perhaps for changing. The entire structure was fed by a well and had a sophisticated drain. This was clearly not for simple bathing. The Great Bath was almost certainly a place for ritual purification, a sacred font at the very heart of the city's religious life. Its warm, clean waters, a stark and beautiful contrast to the snowy world outside. Nearby stood the granary, a massive structure with a raised brick foundation crisscrossed by air ducts to keep the stored grain dry and free from pests. This was the city's treasury, the storehouse for the agricultural surplus that was the basis of its wealth and power. Its immense size speaks to a highly organized system of collection and redistribution, a central authority capable of managing the economic life of the entire region. Down in the lower town, the same obsession with order and water management was evident. The houses, often 2 or even 3 stories high, were built from the same standardized red fired bricks. They were solid, functional structures built around a central courtyard that was open to the bright, snowy sky, providing light and air. The most astonishing feature was that nearly every house had its own private bathroom and a connection to a citywide sanitation system. Wastewater from the houses flowed through covered brick-lined drains that ran beneath the main streets. These drains had inspection manholes, allowing for regular cleaning and maintenance. This level of hydraulic engineering and civic planning, providing sanitation for the entire populace, would not be seen again in history for thousands of years, not until the height of the Roman Empire. Life in these snowy cities was one of craft and commerce. The society was highly stratified, not by royalty but by occupation. Archaeologists have found distinct neighborhoods for different artisans. Here was the bead maker's district, with workshops littered with the debris of semi-precious stones. There was the potter's quarter, with rows of kilns sending plumes of warm smoke into the cold winter air. Coppersmiths cast tools and weapons. Weavers produced fine cotton textiles. The Indus people were among the first in the world to cultivate and weave cotton, and shell workers crafted intricate bangles and inlays. Trade was the lifeblood of the civilization. A standardized system of weights and measures based on a unit of 13.63 grams was used across the entire Indus realm. Cubical weights made of polished chert, ranging from tiny to massive, ensured that a merchant in Mohenjo-Daro could conduct fair business with another in a town hundreds of kilometers away. Goods traveled up and down the frozen river on sledges and along overland routes in sturdy, two-wheeled ox carts with solid wooden wheels. The most iconic and mysterious artifacts of this commercial and administrative life are the thousands of small square steatite seals that have been discovered. Each seal is a miniature masterpiece, intricately carved with a depiction of an animal, most commonly the unicorn bull, but also humped zebu cattle, elephants, rhinoceroses, and tigers, and a short inscription in the still undeciphered Indus script. These seals were likely used by merchants, officials, and perhaps different family clans to stamp clay tags on goods, creating a unique, identifiable mark of ownership or authority. They are windows into the Indus mind, showing a world of powerful animal symbolism, but their ultimate meaning, locked within the silent script, remains a profound mystery. What is strikingly absent from this picture of a complex, wealthy, and powerful civilization is the evidence of kingship as seen in Egypt and Mesopotamia. There are no grand palaces dominating the cityscape. There are no colossal statues of rulers. There are no lavish royal tombs filled with gold and treasures. While some figures, like the famous priest-king statuette, a small but dignified sculpture of a bearded man with a trefoil-patterned robe, suggest a ruling elite, their power seems not to have been expressed through personal aggrandizement. This has led to one of the central debates about the Indus Valley Civilization. How was it governed? Was it a collection of city-states ruled by a priestly class whose authority was religious and ceremonial? Was it an empire governed by anonymous committees of elites or merchants? Or was their concept of power and governance simply so different from our own that we have failed to recognize its archaeological signature? The order and standardization across such a vast area strongly suggest a central authority, but one that was collective and anonymous rather than individual and despotic. The cities themselves, with their focus on public works like drains and granaries, rather than palaces and temples, suggest a state concerned with civic stability and economic management above all else. It was a civilization
Our story
built on
begins
order,
not in a desert,
not on the cult
but in
of
a world of
personality.
profound white and brilliant sun. A vast river, the lifeblood of a continent, lies frozen for half the year, a great highway of ice snaking through a landscape of silent, snow-covered plains and distant, jagged mountains. This is the world of the Indus, reimagined as a realm of winter. Here, In the Fertile Crescent's easternmost reach, one of the three great cradles of civilization would arise, a world shaped not by relentless heat, but by the annual miracle of the Great Thaw. For the people who settled these lands around 7000 BC, life was a cycle of deep freeze and glorious life giving flood. These first inhabitants were Neolithic farmers, drawn to the promise of the river. They established small villages like Mergar in the foothills, perched above the vast floodplain. In this snowy landscape, they began a slow, patient dialogue with the land. They learned to cultivate cold, hardy strains of wheat and barley, crops that could be sown just before the first snows and harvested in the rush of warmth that followed the thaw. They herded a unique breed of long-haired zebu cattle, their characteristic humps serving as fat reserves for the long winter, and robust water buffalo that could break through the river ice to graze on the reeds below. They lived in simple, semi-subterranean mud brick houses, their structures designed to retain the warmth of a central fire pit as snow piled high on their flat roofs. For thousands of years, this was a world of small, scattered communities. But the river was a powerful engine of change. Every year, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, the great thaw would begin. With a roar that echoed through the valleys, the great ice sheets on the river would fracture and break, and a torrent of meltwater from the high mountains would surge down the valley. This was a destructive, chaotic force, but it brought with it a precious gift, a thick, incredibly fertile layer of dark silt that was deposited across the entire floodplain as the waters receded. This annual renewal of the land allowed for agricultural surpluses on a scale previously unimaginable. With more food came more people, and with more people came the need for greater organization. By around 3300 BC, during what is known as the early Harappan phase, villages began to grow into towns. The people learned that the best defense against the destructive power of the flood was to build high. They began constructing massive raised platforms of mud brick upon which they built their settlements. It was during this period that a crucial technological innovation appeared, the fired brick. In a world of snow and flood, sun-dried mud brick would quickly dissolve. By firing their bricks in intensely hot kilns, the Indus people created a building material that was waterproof, durable, and perfectly suited to their challenging environment. This simple, red brick would become the literal building block of their entire civilization. Towns like Harappa, on the banks of the Ravi tributary, and Kotdiji began to show the first signs of the order that would later define their culture. They were fortified with massive defensive walls, not necessarily against great armies, but perhaps to protect the community and its vital grain stores from raiders and the chaos of the annual flood. Within these walls, a sense of planning emerged. Houses were built along shared lanes, and different areas were set aside for different purposes. Living quarters here, workshops for artisans there. This period saw the birth of their unique artistic and symbolic world. Potters created beautiful wheel-thrown ceramics, painted with geometric designs, and stylized animals in warm, earthy tones of red and black. Artisans began to fashion beads from semi-precious stones and to work copper and bronze into tools and simple ornaments. Most significantly, the first hints of their writing system appeared, scratched onto the surfaces of pottery, and the first of their iconic seals began to be carved from soapstone. These small, square objects, intricately engraved with the images of animals, particularly a powerful bull-like creature, often mistaken for a unicorn, were perhaps used by village elders or early traders to mark ownership. This was not yet a unified civilization, but a collection of regional cultures, each developing along its own trajectory, but all connected by the great river and a growing network of trade. They were laying the foundations, brick by painstaking brick, for the great urban explosion that was to come. They had mastered their snowy world,
learned to harness the power of the Great Thaw and develop the technology and social organization necessary for the next great leap. The silent river had given its gifts, and now, upon its frozen banks, the world's most enigmatic and orderly civilization was about to be born.